This conference will now be recorded.
Okay. So good afternoon. We are here to give the first of three public hearings on the 2021 proposed budget. This is a preliminary budget that has been put together and has been shared with the municipal council and discussed with them. This is our first public meeting this afternoon. We're going to do another one this evening, and then there's a subsequent one we will have as well. Also, please be advised that the public will have the opportunity up until the adoption of the budget to review and see and hear the information that's going on with the budget at the various meetings that we have with council in discussion of the budget. At the end of this presentation, both in discussion and once it is posted on the website, you'll have information about when, what time and what date those subsequent meetings will be. So with that, let's get started. Alicia, be happy to go to the first slide and we can go from there. Norma, I'm going to turn it over. I thought I had my slide in there, but I'll turn it over to you, Norma. You go ahead.
All right. Well, the 2021 revenue estimate, as you can see, we're estimating at this time revenue of $688,991. The real property tax we're estimating right now in 2021 is the same as 2020. Act 511 taxes, which include earned income tax and the gross mercantile gross receipts tax, as well as several other taxes, comes in at 11.2 million, down about 3.8%. And most of this is because, obviously, of COVID. We're working with Berkheimer to come up with a tighter estimate on Act 511 taxes, but right now that's down about $450,000, unfortunately. Licenses, permits down 6.5%, fines and forfeits down 10.8%. Interest and rent, interest earnings rate is rock bottom. It's 2 basis points, down 34%. Intergovernmental revenue up slightly, and charges for fees and services up 29%, 29.7%. And all of that is essentially related to an increase in what we anticipate for solid waste collection fees that will be billed to residential property owners. So that's the revenue picture summary, 34.6, almost $34.7 million. Next slide, Alicia, if you would, is the expenditure summary. And the summary is broken down into salaries, benefits, retirement, total personnel costs, and then total operating costs. The bottom line for the estimate of 2021 is $37,226,275. The total is up about a little over 8%, 8.04%. Salaries, $14.1 million, up 4.2%. Benefits at almost $5.5 million, down just slightly, not quite 1%. And that's essentially because of an accounting change that we've made. We're now accounting for only the net cost of health insurance. Previously, we had included employees' share premium cost as revenue, and then grossed up the cost of health insurance. A better way of looking at it from cost of the municipality is simply the net cost. So we've taken out the employee share of premium costs, which is why it shows a slight decline. Actually, the cost of health insurance hasn't declined. It's just the way we're now accounting for it in the budget. Retirement is up 3.35% at 3.8 million, and that pretty much tracks to a certain extent salaries. Total personnel cost up just slightly less than 3%, 2.18%. And operating expenditures. And one thing I would add with our total personnel costs are about almost 63% of the budget. The remaining 37% at $13,791,514 is operating expenses. Operating expenses are up a little over $2 million, 18.25%. And again, most of that $2 million is a result of rebidding the solid waste collection contract, and that was up $2 million. So total expenditures are up just over 8%. That's the summary. And boss, I don't know what you want to do now. We can go to look at the difference between revenue and expenditure, talk a little bit about some of the options that were presented to council, and then some of the meetings going forward, if you want to do that.
Yes.
So as I just mentioned, revenue comes in up budget to budget, the 2020 budget to the 2021 budget, up 2.2%. As I just mentioned, to roughly $30.7 million. Expenditures up 9.6% at $37.2 million, leaving us with a deficit of about $2.5 million. Not an enviable place to be at this point, but caused almost entirely by COVID, the lockdown, the impact it's had on our revenue base, and of course the increase in solid waste collection fees. Let's take a look at the next slide. So we have this $2.5 million gap to close. We have a requirement in state law and in our home rule charter to have a balanced budget. We can close that gap one of three ways, or a fourth way using a combination of the first three. And what we have available to us is using fund balance for a portion of the gap. We can and we will look further at the operating budget to see where we can reduce expenses. We have some beginning to put together some ideas for the municipal administrator and to be passed on to council the next time we meet. Also, we're looking at the potential for an increase in the real estate tax rate. No one of these first three options is going to be able to close that $2.5 million gap entirely. So obviously, in that case, then we're going to have to come back with a combination approach, some fund balance, some reduction in expenditures, and some increase in the real estate tax rate, accompanied also by an increase in the solid waste collection fee. So those are the options. Not necessarily an enviable place to be, but it is nonetheless where we are, and we will come up with some options for council to consider to close the gap. And then, Alicia, if you put the final slide up. Thank you. Next steps. Obviously, today is Thursday, October 1st, and we're having this public session, one this evening and one on October 6th, public meetings to discuss the proposed budget. Tuesday, October 20th at the council meeting, the municipal administrator will make a formal presentation of the proposed 2021 budget to council with, again, the recommendations of how to close the budget gap. Wednesday, October 21st to October 31st to be the proposed budget will be available for public review and comments. And then our hope is that council will adopt the balanced budget at its meeting on November 17th, and we'll have the 2021 budget wrapped up just prior to Thanksgiving. That's our goal. So back to you, Crandall, for any comments you might have.
Thank you, Norm. One of the things we want to make clear, and I certainly want to make clear, is we had our discussion with council on this for the public, is to understand that as we have in prior years, and you certainly look at all of our budgets, we've held our operating budget pretty even, and our operating costs have always pretty much been nominal and flat, 2-3% increase, pretty much based on the cost of materials, et cetera. And we've done that again even in this COVID pandemic environment, we're operating under budget. The challenge is because of all of the challenges related to COVID, whether it be people being out of work, businesses closing down, et cetera. As Norm discussed earlier, we're not getting the revenues that we typically get, as are most communities not getting the revenues. So obviously we knew it was going to impact our budget. There's a certain amount of uncertainty that goes with all of this because, like most communities around the state who followed the governor's recommendations, we extended relief in terms of pretty much waiving the penalty on property tax bills this year. And so while we have had, I think, a reasonable inflow and a pretty typical inflow of tax payments to now, we certainly know that there will be folks who may not be able to meet their tax payments because of COVID, and or folks who we hope is most likely the case, who might be taking advantage of that and waiting until the last quarter to do that. And so we won't really know what the final impact of COVID and this year COVID has done from a property tax standpoint, really until after December 31st, which is the last day of the year to get taxes paid without penalty this year. The other thing is, as Norm alluded again, the Act 511 taxes, earned income tax, business privilege tax, et cetera, fines, fees, revenue, all impacted by COVID directly in terms of people not having jobs, businesses not doing business, and some of that revenue has not come. So that really forces us into a situation where in the prior year, we had really prepared ourselves, lowered our annual operating costs by almost $2 million in terms of some restructuring of a debt, but that got eaten away by COVID and also the reality of what it costs to haul trash in an effective manner. So one of the things that we are going to do, and have advised council and want the public to know, is that my recommendation is that for 2021, with all this uncertainty that's going on around COVID and when an actual recovery begins and a return to normal begins, that we kind of stick to core operations in 2021. The team has some, continues to make great proposals in terms of projects and initiatives going into the new year. But until we know where we are and we know that we'll be able to actually afford and have the revenue to handle any new initiatives, my recommendation to council is that we stick to our core services and core operations, and that we take a look at the halfway point of next year, in the second quarter, where we are in terms of what a pandemic is and how that's impacted the local economy and our local government as well, and reassess if we're at a point where there's some things we can do in terms of some new initiatives that were proposed. We'll come back to council with that report and recommendation for an amendment to the budget. Conversely, if we get to that halfway point or before, if it looks critical before that halfway point and things are getting worse, we certainly will come back to the council and say, hey, we might need to reduce services or operations or something to be able to accommodate this new economic normal that's around the pandemic. So we ask citizens, and we'll certainly and residents will certainly put the information out there to just be aware and keep tabs on the information in the council meetings as we discuss this budget. So we'll do that reassessment as needed. If that things look better, we know there's some activity coming online. There might be some opportunities, but until those opportunities actually come in hand, we don't budget for what's not in hand. We're very conservative in our approach to budgeting. So we're going to be, as Norma alluded, looking at multiple strategies to address the $2.5 million revenue gap that we're looking at, and we'll keep council and the public posted as we continue to operate on this really fluid budget document, and the process is fluid itself. So with that, we thank you for your attention to this. This presentation will be posted on our website and linked to our social media, so that anybody who could not make this or future sessions will have an opportunity to have access to what's going on related to our 2021 proposed budget. I know the press is here on this call, so certainly if you have any questions related to what we presented, I'd be happy to take those questions.
If I could just ask, I know this is preliminary at this point, what types of strategies is council administration
You're going really in and out. It's difficult to hear you, Rachel.
All right.
Rachel, if you want to just text them or put them into the message box here, that might be a good start.
I'll be happy to do that.
We'll give that a moment. So Rachel's question is, although it's preliminary, can you elaborate on what types of strategies municipal staff may be considering to reduce the deficit? What does that look like? Thank you for the question. So again, I'll go back to one of the things we alluded in one of the last slides. Obviously, we have in front of us the opportunity, you have to consider, are you going to raise taxes? Are you going to cut operations? Are you going to go into fund balance? We do have fund balance, and none of those are things that you want to do. And no one thing in those three choices are things that can sustain the gap alone. We have to maintain a certain level of fund balance. We have a policy goal that council established that our fund balance remain at least 20%. And so we're going to have to look at a combination of alternatives. We've already started doing that. This preliminary budget that we presented to the council, actually, we reduced some of the proposed new activities that we were looking at doing, or at least reduce the level of some of it, because we knew we had a gap to deal with. We'll go back and look at it. We are looking at core services, and so at the end of the day, if we took the first blush at it and say, do you want to do a third of a tax of that, a third of that gap as a reduction in operating costs? Do you want to do a third of that gap as utilization of fund balance? And do you want to do a third of that as an increase in property taxes? A third, it's about a little over $800,000 would be pretty much a 1 mil tax increase. We're trying to avoid as much as possible those scenarios. So there's some projects that are scheduled to come online, development projects that are scheduled to come online that may help us find ways to reduce that gap. We're looking at additionally the possibility of some changes or operational things that we're doing that we might delay some to the middle of the year, later in the year, so that we don't have to budget for the entire cost of those operations. And then you look at the possibility, which is real at the end of the day. Do you want to reduce operations? That's a tough one for this community because we pretty much rely mainly on essential operations to keep the government flowing. That's been our thing. We've been active in our use of grants and other things to help supplement the work that we do. So we'll see. Norm and I have talked a little bit about the possibility of a tax anticipation note as a possible thing, but we'll see. And when you talk about the core services, fire, police, you can't, codes, operations, all of those things are the core services. Public works, those are core services in the operation. So, for instance, we've got an aggressive program where we're trying to do more and more in-house paving of alleys and streets because the funds we get from the state aren't sufficient to do it as aggressively as we like. We may reduce the number of the streets and alleys that we will, and the materials to do that, and some of the equipment we might anticipate having to purchase to do some of that, we might reduce that as a part of getting to the bottom line of those. So those are the kinds of things. If we've got operational equipment purchases that were scheduled for early purchase in the year, we might delay them to the end of the year. We might push them back for another year in terms of that 6-month assessment that I looked at earlier. So, a lot of our, the majority of our benefits, et cetera, are negotiated in labor agreements. So that makes it much tougher for us to do things like, change the percentage of healthcare costs, which again, you don't want to do for folks that employees have to pay. But those are the kinds of things that if you weren't in a labor environment, you can more readily consider it. Much more difficult to do in a labor environment. So we're going to look at all the things that are feasible and practical to reduce operating costs. The hope is also, but we can't budget on that, is that there's going to be some federal relief in terms to local and state governments I know that's under discussion. Discussion's not going well now. I don't anticipate it to go well anytime in 2020, but we'll see what happens. So that can have, those are the kind of things that we can do. And I think that answered that. You said some types of upcoming projects. Again, there were street projects. There was a major codes initiative that we were looking at. There was a major initiative to address some blighted properties in terms of a massive demolition project to reduce some blighted properties. We thought, and still might, depending on if some projects, some redevelopment projects in town happen the way that we think, that might give us some opportunities if things return to normal to do those things. Council's big focus for council obviously has been on addressing some of the blight issues and dealing with some of the properties that absentee property owners aren't addressing, and that state law hamstrings local governments to address in terms of how we deal with the property and property owner rights. But certainly in the interest of public safety, we have to consider what it means to, what needs to be done to take those down. One of those projects initially started out as a $900,000 project to target some blighted properties in town. That's over $1 million of taxes that we're talking about if we were able to do that. And so we might have to, certainly have to scale that back. And we have to look at those kind of things to reduce the burden. So those are some of the things that we'll look at. We'll evaluate other things that we could do to reduce the burden on all three legs of that table that we were talking about. Taxes, fund balance, and third leg that escapes me right now that we're considering in doing it. Any other questions? All righty, so thank you so much, Rachel. We appreciate your questions. Again, we'll have another meeting tonight. Is it 6 or 6:30, Norm? You're muted right now. I can't. You're muted, Norm.
I do not know the exact time. Alicia or Kathy, do you have the time?
It's 6:30.
6:30. Thank you. So
Thanks.
at 6:30, this, like I say, this will be posted on the website almost immediately, and the 6:30 meeting will be pretty much this, other than any additional questions that might come up, and we'll record that meeting. If there are any attendees, if not, we'll give it a grace period to see, and we'll open it, close it, and go on. But thank you so much, everybody.
Just before you sign off, Crandall, Kevin, I see number 7 up in the right-hand corner of my screen in red. What does that mean?
I think it's just the number of people who are in on this hearing.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay, so it's not questions that 6 questions that we've left unanswered then.
No, those are attendees.
Okay, great.
All righty. Thank you, everybody. Appreciate it. Have a good one.